Hello, and welcome back to NieR Replicant. Let's have a little aside, shall we? And go into some of the backstory of some characters you may have a few questions about. Remember that really wonky timeline I showed you? You see, there's a lot of short stories and novels and novellas that go into each and every single one of these NieR games. And I'm not going to go into every single one, but this one I do think is rather interesting. So we're going to do a little reading on it. All taken from the Grimoire NieR, specifically revised edition. It's the one that I have, and we will be reading the story. And then there were none. Not the Agatha Christie story, which is, however, one of my favorite books ever written in history, but this is a story, origin, backstory, about a few characters you may have some questions about. So let's do it. This is set in to be sort of a short story play style telling. So let's set the scene a little bit. The curtain rises to the tune of the Pied Piper's flute, and the fate of humanity plays out on a Hamlin stage. Pied Piper, and then there were not, yes, remember, we have a lot of fairy tale themes hidden in NieR. Taro's just that kind of dude, and so that's something that we gotta get used to. This has nothing to do with the fairy tale, but it does have the Pied Piper's theme. Okay. I'm in a room with no windows and no doors. It's huge and brightly lit. Despite there not being any visible lights, somehow the ceiling seems to be functioning as a source of illumination. The other people around me are all roughly the same age, and a variety of different races. I count 9 men, including myself, and 4 women. Some are still out cold, but others are on their feet, readying themselves for what might come next. A single book lies on the ground next to each of us. What happened, and what am I even doing here? I felt dizzy. Drugged? It's never a good idea to get up quickly in situations like this, so I reach for my gun, and I slowly study the room. It's gone. Which is no real surprise. Wouldn't make sense to kidnap someone and then leave them with a weapon, after all. But my abductors have done an unusually thorough job of removing it, and everything from the wire woven in the hem of my pants to the explosives secreted in the sole of my shoe. They found everything I had, which is how I know I've been abducted by the very organization to which I belong. I figured something like this was coming ever since they started talking about a sketchy, secret mission I was apparently free to accept or refuse as I saw fit. But not only did they offer an incredible sum of money, they also promised a full discharge when it was over. They claimed I'd finally be able to kiss the whole shitty lifestyle goodbye. You'd have to be a moron to refuse an offer like that. Or some kind of deranged sociopath who actually enjoys the killing. Anyway, it was obvious the mission wasn't on the up and up, not with the kind of reward waiting for the finish line. I figured I'd be short of the thing they were send 100 guys and maybe even come home. Or hell, maybe just 1 out of 1,000. Because you only offer that level of compensation if you're damn sure you won't end up having to pay it. And yet, even having known all that, here I am. Just thinking about it makes me chuckle. A voice calls out, interrupting my musing. I turn to find a man who looks to be over a year or 2 my junior. But he's unfortunately from some other country, and I can only shake my head in response to his words. That response seems to do the trick because he doesn't like to talk to me again. The group I belong to is a multinational organization, but most of the members are only known by their mother tongue. There is no time to study foreign languages. As soon as our age hits double digits, we're pushed aside into the round-clock combat training. Most of us can barely read and write in our own language, much less a second one. And sure, there are a few bilinguals in the org, folks with parents in 2 different countries, and a handful who were born in one place and raised in another. But there are exceptions that prove to that rule. Because I'm curious, I call out a greeting in my native tongue to the man sitting across from me. He responds with a shake of his head, as does the woman seated to the left. She looks groggy. I'm guessing her sedative just wore off. Those are the effects of people differently, but as a general rule, folks like her are usually the first to die. The slow don't tend to survive for long. Suddenly the woman locks her gaze on me, her gaze widening in surprise. Well, this is interesting. Who the hell is she? She looks familiar somehow, but I can't place her. As I ponder the struggles to stand on a pair of unsteady legs, then immediately crashes back into the floor with an epic thud. But her clumsy pratfall finally knocks loose a memory. You survived, eh? The woman nods as she pulls herself to her feet once more. She's one of the rare polyglots in the organization. Her mother must hail from my homeland. Children always remember the language of their mothers. I'm glad to see you survived as well. Of course I survived. But you? Now that's a surprise. We'd met 3 years ago, and we were both in the 13th Crusade, a large-scale offensive against the Legion. We'd been assigned to different units, but once the fighting started, an organization collapsed, and things like who I was in the unit didn't matter for shit. And yeah, war's always like that, but that one especially was bad. I was 16 at the time, already a hardened veteran, and I pegged my odds of survival at a respectable 50-50. But then, in the midst of all the chaos, I saw this dimwit standing in front of one of the Legion, completely frozen. Not knowing what else to do, I knocked her out of the way and torched the whole area. Not because I was trying to be some kind of hero, it wasn't anything so high-minded, it's just that the soldiers are a valuable resource, so we gotta make sure we take care of each other. Or, to put it another way, we can't let each other go to waste. Anyway, believe it or not, that dimwit was the same age as me, but unlike me, she'd been thrown into the battlefield without the benefit of years of training. No wonder she went into shock the moment she had to go toe-to-toe with one of the Legion. See, the Legion look like people, because that's what they used to be. White chlorination syndrome kills damn near everyone who contracts it, and the few who survive turn into psychopathic monsters. But that aggression isn't even the main reason we're so desperate to wipe them out. The bigger issue is they're still contagious, which means even one of them could start a new outbreak. We're 3 years into this strange pandemic, and we have no idea how to cure it. I guess it all started with some kind of white giant that isn't even from this world? I don't know, something like that. But while we don't have the cure, we do have luciferase, a medicine with protective properties. Problem is, no one's been able to mass produce it. Plus, it seems to only work on kids, and the younger they are, the more effective it is. Long story short, that's how we ended up here. The strongest kids are drafted, given what little use luciferase there is to go around, and sent to fight the Legion. The international group responsible for training and deploying these children warriors is called the Hamlin Organization, the name that comes across the fairy tale about a Pied Piper who lures a bunch of kids away, which always struck me as being poor taste. So, what are you doing here? I was told it was a top-secret mission. High compensation, full discharge, completely free to accept or refuse, right? She looks taken aback for a second and then immediately nods, like she's just been putting the pieces together. She goes on to tell me how she's been attending school until that day 3 years ago. Just kicking it along like everything in the world and just perfectly normal. Guess it stands to reason she'd be sharper than me, given that she got to go to school. I imagine that everyone here was given the same offer. I nod as I scan the room again. It's a diverse group of participants and most likely chosen to represent a wide variety of nationalities. Even at a glance, it's clear that this girl and I are the only ones managing to communicate with each other. I suppose it was an offer no one could refuse. Oh, she's right about that. Anyone who does what we do would leap at the chance to escape this life. I mean, we're mass murderers, plain and simple. And sure, they tell us our enemies are monsters and completely devoid of intelligence, but they look like people, and our job is to burn them alive. Yep, burn them. See? The blood and saliva of white chlorination syndrome victims are supposed to be contagious, so they don't want gunshots splattering fluids around. We're actually ordered not to fire guns unless it's absolutely necessary, and since none of us want to be inhaling anything that dangerous, it's no one's order we're happy to obey. Since it doesn't feel good to see creatures that look like humans being wrenched in flames and burning to death, I was barely 10 years old, the first time I torched one of the Legion. And 9 years later, I'm still not used to it. Each time is just as terrible as the first. So, what do you think these things are? Asked the woman, pointing to the tome next to her. They look like books, but they don't open. Said books are thick, with covers that's somewhere between black and dark gray in color and have nothing written on them. After a moment, the woman picks hers up and tries to pry it open. Hey, stop! Don't touch that! She drops the book like it's on fire, and I respond with a loud sigh. In this respect, she hasn't changed at all in the last 3 years. See, we were stuck together for a while after I saved her. Considering how green she was, I wasn't about to abandon her. Luckily, she proved to be a quick learner, and I gave her the occasional pointer when we moved. And that was all she needed to keep up. She was tough, too. If she hadn't been, she wouldn't have been drafted at 16, no matter how well she responded to the loose phrase. But eventually, we had to part ways, at which point I figured she was done for. Once the battle was over, there was no way either of us to know if the other was still alive. Eventually, the Legion surrounded us, and the only chance for survival was for us to book it in different directions and hope one made it out. Since I was both more likely to survive, greater value in future skirmishes, it made sense for me to run for safety, and yet I immediately took off in the right into the jaws for danger. It was like I possessed something, but I can't think of any other explanation. But it made me uncomfortable whenever I try to remember it, so I usually try not to. Can't believe you survived, I say. You got lucky. She shakes her head to indicate otherwise. I'm alive because you covered my escape. I wasn't trying to, just made a bad choice is all. She opens her mouth to speak again, but is interrupted when a man and a woman start raising their voices in the corner of the room. At first, I assume they've lucked into finding someone who speaks their language, but it quickly becomes clear that that isn't the case. I don't know what they're arguing about, some trivial offense most likely, but they're going at it hard, spewing vitriol in languages I can't comprehend. Finally, the woman has enough and slaps the man across the face, and he grabs her with an angry snarl. No one moves to intervene. We've all had training in how to fight, and the Legion hand-to-hand combat, and we know how dangerous it is to get in between them. Just then, the book and the arguing woman's feet suddenly springs open. She didn't touch it. It didn't accidentally kick it. It just opens. The moment it does, a gigantic black hand explodes from its pages and grabs the man she's been arguing with and crushes him to death. He looks sort of confused when it happened, like he can't believe it, and the woman stares an equally dumbfounded expression. A second later, the man's copy of the book starts to emit a brilliant light. I figure there's another hand on the way, but instead, the book just sucks the man's body into itself. As soon as the corpse is gone, the light vanishes, and the cover of the book changes from a blackish gray to a brilliant blue. And some sort of pattern emerges on it. A pattern that looks uncomfortably like a human face. The shocked silence that ensues is brief. The uproar that follows is immediate. "What was that?" cries the woman next to me. "The hell should I know?" I reply as I reach for my copy of the book. While I'd initially been hesitant to touch something I knew so little about, things have changed, and now I feel it's imperative to learn as much as possible. There are no words or illustrations on the cover. Not even a single scratch or mark. It also doesn't feel like it's made out of any paper I'm familiar with. Also, as my recent acquaintance had discovered, it's sealed up tight, almost like the pages have been glued together. How did she even get this thing open, I muse? And that's when it happens. As if to answer my question, or maybe to mock me for having asked it, an unseen speaker suddenly begins to blare the same message in 13 different languages simultaneously. At first, it's just a cacophony, but I finally managed to locate one speaking in my language. It's an important announcement, but it's hardly what I'd call helpful. "Each of you has been given a magical grimoire. Use them to kill each other. Only 2 will survive." The entire message looping over and over again. There's no explanation or anything, just the message. Top secret mission, my ass. As I spit out the words and my eyes already scanning the environment, there are no windows or doors and no path of escape. If I want to survive, then I have to fight. But starting a giant melee in a place like this means it's nearly impossible to ensure 2 people survive. At best, you'll probably have 1 survivor, and the number could easily drop to 0. Still, I don't want to be the one to make the first move. The woman in the corner reaches for her book, but a man beside her is faster. He wraps his hand around her neck and twists it, and there's a soft snap, and her limbs go limp. 1 down. I figured her murderer would be the next to die. You're most vulnerable when killing someone else, and just as expected, 2 men are already coming at him from behind. They strike simultaneously, and I can tell it's not something they worked out in advance. They just intuitively understood the most effective tactic. But the 2 attackers aren't the ones to kill the man. As the woman's corpse is being sucked into her book, her face twists with anguish, and he collapses on the ground before being sucked into his own book. Soon, 2 grimoires are all that remain, one with a jade green cover, and the other the color of amber. As I watch the patterns in the shape of strange faces emerge on both covers. "Use the grimoire," mutters the woman at my side, and I understand what she means. Apparently the lady who used the black hand from the book had been acknowledged as a victor, but the man who killed her with his bare hands, not so much. So that's the deal, huh? I'd clearly been right not to make the first move, and she'd been right to follow my lead. Now we understand the rules and have a better grasp of the situation, but the problem is I have no idea what to do with my book. How the hell am I supposed to start using magic? I feel my lips curl into a grin, even though there's nothing remotely amusing about this situation. It finally hits me how shaken I really am by all of this. Even the first time I had to face the Legion, I managed to stay relatively calm. I knew if I had just followed my training, a solution would eventually present itself. But this? I haven't trained for this, and I have no idea if a solution is going to present itself. Hell, I just watched 3 people die in front of me because of books. Thinking of that makes me want to slam my copy into the ground, but before I can, someone grabs my arm. "I'm so glad there can be 2 survivors," says the woman. "That means you and I don't have to fight each other. We're lucky. We can both survive." Not sure I'd call anything about this situation lucky, but she smiles at me regardless. And not the weird half smile of someone losing their shit like I am, but a true smile you can tell comes straight from the heart. "So relax," she continues. "Everyone else is on their own, but we're a pair. If we work together on this, our 2 heads will figure out something before anyone else." She might be right. Having an ally I can communicate with can be a powerful weapon in a situation like this. Okay, fair enough. Gotta tell you though, I ain't exactly the brightest bulb in the lamp. She chuckles before placing her hand on the cover of her book, but her expression turns serious as she examines the stack of its sealed pages. The woman before was angry. Also, she was moments away from being killed, and the black hand has to be connected to one of those 2 factors. Or maybe both. But let's set that aside for the moment. Still, having to be at the brink of death to use this thing seems like a pretty high hurdle. Maybe just being told to kill each other is enough to satisfy the requirement? So in that case, perhaps. She lifts her head as if an idea occurred to her, but the excitement on her face dissipates quite immediately. I never get the chance to ask what happened because her body suddenly lunges forward and she reaches out for me. I feel the impact on my back and immediately understand I'm being knocked away. Within my spinning field of vision, I see a massive black lance piercing her all through her body, and all sound disappears. She must have seen the incoming projectiles from over my shoulder and moved me aside. Maybe it was payback for what I'd done for her 3 years earlier, or maybe it was something else. The book beside me lights up. As I frantically scramble over to her, if I don't do anything, she'll be sucked into the book and disappear forever. So I grab her hands tight and start yanking as hard as I can. "Don't disappear! Don't you dare disappear on me!" Her lips quiver. What is she trying to say? It's in her native tongue. I'm not bilingual like her, so I can't understand it. Hell, for that matter, I don't even know her name. We didn't think we'd live to see each other again, so neither of us bothered introductions. Suddenly her weight slips from my arms. The hands I'd been clutching so tightly are gone, sliding through my fingers like water, and all that remains is a book with a deep red cover reminiscent of blood, and the face that appears on it doesn't look anything like hers at all. The world fades and goes white. I scream. I just scream. Strange letters and script I've never seen before appear in front of my eyes, blotting out my field of view. But I just keep screaming. Abruptly, sound returns to the world and I hear shrieks, then moaning. Countless sharp black spikes protrude from the floor as my hazy vision sweeps the room. I see that everyone has been impaled simultaneously. The strange script envelops my field of vision, making the whole spectacle feel somehow unreal. But when it finally clears, I see a single man standing at the end of the room, and he beams with pride as he clutches his book in his hands, pleased with his apparent victory. I'm guessing the spears came from him, just like I'm guessing that strange script is the reason I'm alive right now. I survived. The thought brings me no joy. I have no impulse to grin victoriously like the man across from me, which is not to say I have any particular desire to mourn the dead either. To be perfectly honest, none of it matters to me. Suddenly, I see bright lights out of the corner of my eye. 2 books have lit up. One belonging to the man who was intensive victor of the whole affair, and the one given to me. The other man is screaming something, his voice thick with dismay. I can only imagine it's something along the lines of, "Hey, we're the last two. We're supposed to leave. Get us out of here alive." The thing is, while the voice had promised two could survive, it didn't say anything about letting us leave. Well, I'd figured as much. The higher-ups at the organization aren't good people. In fact, I already know they're lying when they claim luciferase will protect us from white chlorination syndrome. All it does is delay the onset of symptoms. It doesn't actually stop anything. We'd all been deceived, and they were using us. They gave us medicine that couldn't protect us, and sent us into the heart of the contagion. The children the Pied Piper had led away were all going to get sick and die sooner or later, or else become monsters and get killed. And this book thing? Probably just another one of their human experiments. Our fates were sealed the moment they gathered us here. The man's screams finally stopped, and I see a face rise up on the jet black cover of his book. It doesn't resemble his face any more than the face on the red book that resembles hers. Or at least, I don't think it does. The reason I'm not sure is because I've already been sucked into a book myself. As to what color that one becomes, I wouldn't be able to see it. Ah. White. So I'm the white book. Grimoire. Vice. God, what a stupid name. It's also ridiculous. I can't help but laugh. So this is the beginning of some new farce? Now that we've been given new faces, what part are we meant to play? I don't know. So I just keep laughing. I'll see you in the next video. But for now, I'm clocking out. Bye-bye.